स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मामृतङ्गमय। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। Let us bow down to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the Supreme God incarnate. Let us pray to Him to remove all our ignorance, to light the lamp of knowledge, to lead us from death to immortality. In last 2-3 classes we have been discussing the important, significant role of worship in our spiritual life. Worship is very important and very essential. Swami Vivekananda advocated non-dualism. He spread all over the world the message of Vedanta. But then Swami Vivekananda himself introduced the worship of Divine Mother. He has written a detailed note how to perform the Durga Puja in Belur Math. It is done in all details, strictly following the method of scriptures, and it is well done. Several hundred people attend the program on Durga Puja day. At least 200,000 people will be there. When I was in Calcutta, I was overwhelmed to see that worship of Divine Mother was done so elaborately and so carefully, how they take all precaution to do the worship very thoroughly. The pujari who has to do the worship will be given special diet, completely sattvic diet, more or less completely liquid diet, so to say, just milk and fruits. For 15 days, the brahmachari should be on that diet. The idea is the diet is prescribed in order to subdue the arrogance of the senses. You don't know how the senses behave. In order to subdue the extra energy of the senses, the diet is prescribed. And on one of the days they bring a child from a cultured family, age between 5 and 6 years. They do Kumari Puja. They invoke Divine Mother in that little girl. And that girl would be taken care of by the Swamis. For about a week, the girl will be in the monastery. It will be taken special care to look after her. All these details are worked out. And you must know, throughout the Ramakrishna mission, a very great importance is given to worship. Swami Ramakrishna ji, one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, he was foremost in introducing this worship. And so we are all here in the name of Sri Ramakrishna. So every part of worship is very significant and elevating. In fact, he was telling Pandit Shashadhar to step into devotional practices. And in that context, Sri Ramakrishna told him to offer worship. In last 2-3 classes, I have been dealing with this subject very thoroughly so that you can have clear understanding of this worship. The worship establishes a relationship between the worshipper and the worshipped. Your mind gets trained to focus on the deity that is being worshipped. It is based on 3 fundamental principles. One is deification of the worshipper. That is the act of exalting. True worship of the Spirit is possible only by the Spirit. True love is possible only between beings of similar nature. A dog's love for man cannot be equated with a man's love for a man or a woman. In order to love or worship a god or a goddess, it follows the worshipper should become a god or goddess himself. That means he must develop divine qualities in himself or herself. Then he would be able to love God in the true sense of the term. You know, according to Vedanta, all the souls are parts of one supreme spirit. And the difference between men and gods lies in the degree of manifestation of the light of spiritual consciousness in them. Probably you are well aware of the word Deva. We often say, in our worship also, every day, probably you might have noticed that the mantra which I use, Om Aim Sarvadeva Devi Swarupaya Sri Ramakrishnaya Namaha. That is the mantra of the worship which I am doing every day in this shrine. Throughout the Ramakrishna Mission centers, the same mantra is used for worship. The meaning of that mantra is Sri Ramakrishna represents the Supreme Spirit, the embodiment of all gods and goddesses. He is everything. He is everywhere, all-pervading spirit. So the word Deva literally means the shining one. Being in ignorance, we are not able to experience that state of Deva-hood. The light of Atman shines brilliantly in gods and goddesses, whereas in us it doesn't shine in the same way because of the covering of the ignorance. So that means we should try to get rid of ignorance. Then you can manifest that inner light. Once that inner light is seen by the worshipper, then he attains the nature of gods. That's the reason why Swami Vivekananda said, each soul is potentially divine. It is already there. Only the covering should be removed. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad also says, Devo bhutva devanam apyeti. By worshipping God, you become God and then you merge in the gods. This statement of the Upanishad is the bedrock of Hindu worship. That means one should acquire an element of divinity in order to worship the divine. That's why we are supposed to maintain sattvic attitude. Particularly when you are proceeding to do puja. You must prepare your mind properly. That's why we say take bath, wear the washed clothes, feel yourself clean, physically, mentally. Then enter the puja room. As soon as you enter the puja room, the first and foremost thing that you should do is to bow down. The worship starts from there. If you forget to bow down, then worship is not started at all, even though you are sitting and ringing the bell and doing all sorts of things. It is as if you have not opened the valve. Water is not flowing because the valve is closed. So, the act of worship starts from the way how you enter the puja room. With all humility, with love, reverence and devotion. Every aspect is very important. You are here to evolve spiritually. You are here to achieve spiritual goal. Then you have to follow these things meticulously. How does a man acquire divinity? This takes us to the second fundamental principle of worship, known as Yatha Kratu. Chandogya Upanishad says, as is one's will, so does he become. That's the meaning of Yatha Kratu. Atha kalu kratumayaha purusho yatha kraturasmin loke purusho bhavati. It's a famous statement in the Upanishad. Kratu means aspiration or creative will. If you intensely strive for an ideal, you will attain it. There is no question of doubt there. By constantly thinking that you are divine, you gradually become divine. By constantly meditating on a god or a goddess, you acquire his or her attributes. So, a man's destiny is determined by his soul's intense aspiration. What you aspire for, that's very important. You must intensely aspire for it. Then you will get it. Wishful thinking or daydreaming is not enough. The will must be powerful enough to transform your character and consciousness. So, the practice of making sankalpa, that is sacramental intention, before the beginning of a ritual, the purificatory rites called Bhuta Shuddhi and other practices are based on the Yatha Kratu principle. All these purificatory rites are prescribed in worship so that you are rightly placed in a proper way to offer the worship. The third principle of worship concerns the power of invocation. Sri Ramakrishna has said in the Gospel that gods respond to the fervent call of a pure and devout heart. He hears it. God hears your prayers. God can hear the movement of the ant. These are the words of Sri Ramakrishna. So the all-pervading divine can be invoked in a specially consecrated image. So herein comes the importance of image worship. According to Hindu system, the worship is of 4 types. One is ritualistic worship. The second one, vocal worship. The third one, mental worship. And the fourth one, manual worship. Very nicely classified. Each one is very interesting, how it takes his soul near God. In ritualistic worship, one propitiates God to fulfill one's desires. Then, if the worship is done with that intention, it is called kamya karma. He is doing it in order to get his desire fulfilled. That's one way. Anyway, that ritualistic worship is also prescribed so that for some reason or other, the person should come near God. That's the idea. But ritualistic worship should be done purely as a spiritual discipline to achieve the spiritual goal. We are doing worship in the chapel every day. This is a kind of spiritual discipline. Puja is done this way so that we can achieve spiritual goal. The second type of worship, vocal worship. What does it mean? It consists of chanting of hymns. People ask sometimes, Swamiji, is it all right if I chant Vishnu Sahasranam every day, or Durga Sahasranam, or Shiva Sahasranam, Ganesha Sahasranam, whatever God you want, you have got Sahasranam for the particular God. In fact, I was just inquiring whether we have the 1,000 names for Kali, Divine Mother Kali. Because in the text which we have in our library, I couldn't find. Finally, I got from Calcutta a famous book, scripture, has that. But I wanted 108 names, 108, Ashtottara Shata, 108. 1,000 names also are available. That means you are invoking her in all these different names. Just you are focusing your attention on the different names of God or Goddess. So chanting of hymns, you have to fix certain stotras. Every day I will read Bhagavad Gita, one chapter. Every day I do this parayan, this chanting of certain stotras. You can feel the difference. You do it wholeheartedly, and next day you stop it, you feel the effect of both the days. You feel you have missed something. When you chant, you feel you are purified. You can't express it, but you feel that. A kind of supreme satisfaction that you could offer worship to God. So chanting of hymns, then singing of devotional songs. bhajans, they are all considered as worship. It's called vocal worship. Vocal worship. Third one, mental worship. That is repetition of a mantra, japa what we call, and visualization of the deity. That is bhavana. When you are repeating the name, the formula, the mystic formula, when you are repeating the mantra, at the same time you visualize the form of that mantra on whom you are meditating upon. So, this is mental worship. Closing your eyes, withdrawing all your senses from external things, and engaging all the senses, particularly the mind, and repeating the divine mantra as many times as you can. If you are able to do for 1 hour, that means you have done 1 hour worship. If you are able to do japa for 2 hours, that means you are able to do worship of God for 2 hours. If you are able to do only for 5 minutes, that means your worship is done for 5 minutes only. The effect also varies accordingly. With what intensity you worship, with what concentration and devotion you worship, that is very important. Lastly, manual worship. It's called in Sanskrit kainkarya. Doing all work as service to the Lord. All these forms of worship are primarily spiritual disciplines. They are intended to shift the focus of one's life from the ego to the divine. According to Sri Ramanujacharya, in the properly consecrated images, God manifests Himself in His special aspect called Archa. There's a famous temple in Kanjivaram. I had gone there. That is the city of temples. 108 temples are there. Each temple is so grand, so nice to look at. And the most important shrine of the place is Kamakshi, the Divine Mother. That's a very famous shrine. There we have got one temple. It's called Varadaraja Swami Temple. Varadaraja Swami, Lord Vishnu Temple. Ramanujacharya, the great Acharya, who expounded Vishishtadvaita, in his younger days, he used to go to the temple every day, carrying pitcher of water from the river to the temple for doing abhishek. That means for giving bath. He used to carry that pitcher on his head. He would come to the temple and offer it to God. He was so devoted. And he did this service so well. He could see Lord Vishnu, he could converse with him, he could talk with him as Sri Ramakrishna talked with Divine Mother Kali, which inspired him to renounce the world. He had married, but then he could not stay any longer in the world, in the worldly sense. Just he left off everything, came to the temple, offered the clothes, Gerva clothes. He offered them at the feet of Lord Vishnu, meditated there for some time, then he wore them on. From that time onwards, he was a monk. Nobody gave sannyas to him. It is as if God himself gave sannyas to him. He went directly to God and took. It's a fantastic life. If you are interested, you please read. Swami Ramakrishna has written Life of Sri Ramanuja. Very beautiful life. So, worship has got tremendous significance. That is the way how to keep our ego under some check. If you don't take steps to keep your ego under check, you don't know how it behaves. It is worse than a monkey. Man becomes erratic on account of the ego. Conflicts, doubts, all these things happen just on account of the existence of uncontrollable, arrogant ego. So, a spiritual aspirant should aspire seriously and try to form the character by following all these methods. Then certainly he will reach the goal. To reach the spiritual goal, everyone will have to come on this earth. That's what our Hindu scriptures say. Even in heavens they can't get the achievement of the spiritual goal. Everyone will have to stay on this earth and work out his realization. He should try to realize the truth and experience peace and joy and attain moksha, liberation. Page 502, Festival at Others' House. As Sri Ramakrishna sang the last song, he went into Samadhi. The devotees sat speechless, gazing at his radiant figure. After some time, he recorded partial consciousness of the world and began to talk to the Divine Mother. The Master said, "Mother, please come down from up there." Did he feel his mind still lingering in the seventh plane of consciousness, the 1,000-petaled lotus of the Sahasrar? "Please do come down," he said. "Don't torment me that way. Be still mother, and sit down. O mother, everybody's future is determined by the tendencies of his previous births. What shall I say to these people? Nothing can be achieved without discrimination and renunciation. Sri Ramakrishna had now regained full consciousness of the world, and he continued, there are many kinds of renunciation. One of them may be called Markata Vairagya, monkey renunciation. It is a false renunciation stimulated by the afflictions of the world. That renunciation doesn't last long. Then there is real renunciation. A man with everything in the world, lacking nothing, feels all to be unreal. It is not possible to acquire renunciation all at once. The time factor must be taken into account. But it is also true that a man should hear about it. When the right time comes, he will say to himself, oh yes, I heard about this. You must also remember another thing. By constantly hearing about renunciation, one's desire for worldly objects gradually wears away. One should take rice water in small doses to get rid of the intoxication of liquor. Then one gradually becomes normal. An aspirant entitled to the knowledge of God is very rare. It is said in the Gita that 1 in thousands desires to know God. And again, that among thousands who have such a desire, only one is able to know him. A devotee quoted the text from the Gita, Manushyanam Sahasreshu, like that. Master said, as your attachment to the world diminishes, your spiritual knowledge will increase. Attachment to the world means attachment to lust and gold. It is not given to everybody to feel prem, ecstatic love of God. Chaitanya experienced it. An ordinary man can at the most experience bhava. Only the Ishwar kotis, such as divine incarnations, experience prema. When prema is awakened, the devotee not only feels the world to be unreal, but forgets even the body which everyone loves so intensely. In a Persian book it is said that inside the skin is the flesh, inside the flesh the bone, inside the bone the marrow, and so on. But that prema is the innermost of all. One becomes soft and tender through prema. On account of this prema, Krishna became Tribhanga, literally bent in 3 places. The usual standing figure of Krishna is bent in 3 places, namely the neck, the waist, and the knees. Prema is a rope by which you can tether God, as it were. Whenever you want to see him, you have merely to pull the rope. Whenever you call him, he will appear before you. The mature stage of bhakti is bhava. When one attains it, one remains speechless, thinking of Satchidananda. The feeling of an ordinary man can go only that far. When bhava ripens, it becomes mahabhava. Prema is a last. You know the difference between a green mango and a ripe one. Unalloyed love of God is the essential thing. All else is unreal. Once Rama was pleased with the prayer of Narad and told him to ask for a boon. Narad prayed for pure love and said further, O Rama, please grant that I may not be deluded by thy world bewitching Maya. Rama said, that's all right, but ask for something else. Narada replied, I don't want anything else. I pray only for pure love. How can a devotee attain such love? First, the company of holy men. That awakens Shraddha, faith in God. Then comes Nishtha, single-minded devotion to the ideal. In that stage, the devotee doesn't like to hear anything but talk about God. He performs only those acts that please God. After Nishtha comes Bhakti, devotion to God. Then comes Bhava, next Mahabhava, then Prema, and last of all, the attainment of God Himself. Only for Ishwar Kotis such as the incarnations is it possible to have Mahabhava or Prema. The knowledge of a worldly person, the knowledge of a devotee, and the knowledge of an incarnation are by no means the same degree. They are by no means of the same degree. The knowledge of the worldly person is like the light of an oil lamp, which shows only the inside of a room. Through such knowledge, he eats and drinks, attends to household duties, protects his body, brings up his children, and so on. The knowledge of a devotee is like the light of the moon, which illumines objects both inside and outside a room. But such light doesn't enable him to see a distant or a very minute object. The knowledge of an incarnation of God is like the light of the sun. Through that light, the incarnation sees everything, inside and outside, big and small. The mind of a worldly person is no doubt like muddy water, but it can be made clear by a purifying agent. Discrimination and renunciation are the purifying agent. The Master spoke to the devotees from Shibapur. Master said, have you any questions to ask? A devotee said, we have listened to your words. Master, yes, it's good to listen to these things, but nothing will happen except at the right time. What can quinine do for a fever patient when he runs a high temperature? Only when his temperature comes down through the use of fever mixture or a purgative should quinine be prescribed. There are patients who get rid of their fever even without quinine. A child said to his mother when he was put to bed, Mother, please wake me up when I feel the call of nature. The mother said, my child, I shall not have to wake you. The urge itself will wake you. Different kinds of people come here. Some come by boat with the devotees, but they don't enjoy spiritual talk. They keep nudging their friends and whispering, when shall we leave here? When are we going? If the friends show no sign of getting up, they say, we would rather wait for you in the boat. Shall stop here.